So good evening once again. So welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to quickly go over the introduction to medical parasitology, and after we are done looking at a few key concepts and key aspects, we are going to try out a few multiple choice questions with everything that we are going to do in this very tutorial. Okay, so the questions that we'll be dealing with are past paper questions on the same topic, which is the introductory part to medical parasitology. Just confirm if you're able to see the screen and you are able to get me properly so that we can move at the same pace. All right. So, what is medical parasitology? We don't want to beat around the bush, just want to go straight to the point. So, in introducing medical parasitology, by definition, medical parasitology just has to do with the study of animal parasites. These animal parasites, which actually infect and produce diseases in human beings. That is what medical parasitology is all about. Okay, but you cannot be asked to define what medical parasitology is all about. Okay, so we move straight into taxonomy of parasites. Taxonomy of parasites. What what does it mean when we talk about taxonomy of parasites? Anyone with an idea of what the statement taxonomy of parasites means? Anybody with an idea of what taxonomy? Okay, as you are still thinking, just the word taxonomy itself, it just has to do with the classification, okay? How things or how organisms are classified and organized, okay, into specific groups or um, shared aspects or characteristics. That is what taxonomy is all about, okay? So that is what we want to look at currently. So in medical parasitology, when we're talking about the taxonomy of parasites, we follow or um, we categorize or we classify these parasites according to the binomial nomenclature. Okay, the binomial nomenclature, and according to the binomial nomenclature, you understand that each parasite has two names. It has the genus name, okay, it has the genus name, and this genus name will always start with a capital letter. Then it also has a species name. So this species name will always start with a small letter. Are we together? So you can just be reacting so that we know that you are following, that we are together. Okay. For example, yeah, for example, we have this amoeba histolytica. Okay, so you'll find that this amoeba histolytica, the the genus name is starting with capital letter E, then the species name is starting with the small letter H. That is what the binomial nomenclature is all about. Okay, but you also need to understand that All parasites are classified uh, um, according to the following taxonomic units. You have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Okay, you need to put that at the back of your mind. Very important. Then further, let's now talk about the parasite. Okay, what is a parasite? So by definition, a parasite is just a living organism which actually which basically lives in. So a parasite can either live in or upon. Very important to take note of this. Okay, in or upon another organism. And this very living organism tends to derive nutrients directly from the other organism without giving any benefit to that organism, which is known as the host. That is what a parasite is. Then from there, we need to talk about the classes of parasites. We need to talk about the classes of parasites. So we have what we call the ectoparasites. We have what we call ectoparasites. So these ectoparasites, they are kind of parasites which actually live on the surface of the host. Okay, and you need to understand that since they live on the surface of the host, since they since they live on the surface of the host, they are significant vectors transmitting the pathogenic microbes. Okay. Then the other thing that you should take note of when it comes to ectoparasites is that the infection that comes about as a result of these parasites which fall under ectoparasites is known as infestation. Okay. So infection caused by ectoparasite is known as infestation. For example, fleas or ticks. Then the other class of parasites are what we call the endoparasites. So endoparasites, just the opposite of ectoparasites. These ones, they live within the body of the host. Okay. For example, we have the leishmania. So this one is an endoparasite. So when we have an invasion by an endoparasite, what comes about is now what we call infection. Okay, so get to differentiate these two. Infection caused by ectoparasite is known as infestation, then invasion caused by endoparasite is what we call infection. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we have four types of endoparasites. We have four types of endoparasites. So these four types of endoparasites, they include obligate parasites. Okay, we have obligate parasites. By description, obligate parasites, these are kinds of parasites which cannot exist without them having a parasitic life in the host. Okay, so in other words, in an obligate parasite actually cannot complete its life cycle without exploiting a suitable host. So in summary or in a nutshell, when it comes to obligate parasite, when we don't have a host, we won't have reproduction. That is the obligate parasites. No host, no reproduction. Because for reproduction to be complete, there is need of a host. Then we also have this one, which is facultative facultative parasite. So when it comes to facultative parasite, these are kinds of parasites which can live both as a free living organism or as a parasite, depending on the environmental conditions. Are we together? So a facultative parasite can live both as a free living organism and a parasite. It just depends with the environmental conditions. Then we also have accidental parasites. Okay, we also have accidental parasites. So for accidental parasites, these ones, these are kinds of parasites which infect uh, an unusual host. Okay, they infect an unusual host. You'll find that, for example, we have this parasite by the name of Echinococcus granulosus. Okay, Echinococcus granulosus. So this parasite by the name of Echinococcus granulosus basically infects humans accidentally. Not that it is supposed to infect humans, but it infects humans accidentally. So those are accidental parasites. Then we have what we call wandering parasites. Okay, we have what we call wandering parasites. So these wandering parasites actually they infect a host, but despite them infecting a host, they cannot live or develop further in that same host. Okay, so those are wandering parasites. They infect a host where they cannot live themselves nor develop further. Okay, for example, we have the parasite by the name of Toxocara in humans. Okay, Toxocara in humans. Are we together? Are we together, somebody? All right, great stuff. So that was with it on the classes of parasites. Now let's talk about the host, because we are mentioning the word host. What exactly is a host? So a host is just an organism which basically harbors the parasite, and it provides nourishment and shelter. That is the host. Okay, it harbors the parasite and provides nourishment and shelter. So we have five types of hosts that are in existence. Okay, we have what we call definitive host. We have what we call definitive host. So these definitive hosts, these are types of hosts where in which the adult parasite is able to replicate itself sexually. Okay, the adult parasite is able to replicate itself sexually. For example, the Anopheles species. Okay, so you need to understand that this definitive host, they can be human or non-human living things. Okay, that is the only definitive host. Then we also have intermediate host. So when it comes to intermediate host, this is a host in which you find that a parasite is able to undergo asexual multiplication. Intermediate host is the host in which intermediate host is a host in which the parasite is able to undergo asexual multiplication. For example, in malaria parasite. Okay, for example, in malaria parasite, you'll find that in malaria parasite life cycle, you'll find that the humans actually function as intermediate hosts. So the other thing that should take note of as far as intermediate hosts are concerned is that intermediate hosts are usually significant or essential for the completion of the life cycle for some parasites. Okay? Then we have reservoir host. Okay? We also have reservoir host. So a reservoir host actually is just simply an organism that tends to harbor a parasite and serve as a source of infection for other species. Okay, reservoir. So we're talking about reservoir, a reservoir host. So this is a host which is able to harbor um, a parasite and serve as a source of infection for other species. For example, you'll find that, for example, a dog. Okay, so a dog is actually the reservoir host for cystic echinococcosis, okay, of which this is a parasitic infection which is caused by the larva stage of Echinococcus granulosa, which tends to primarily affect the liver and the lungs. Are we together? Are we together? All right. Then we have also paratenic host. Okay, we have paratenic host. So when it comes to paratenic host, this is a host in which the parasite lives, but it can't develop further. Okay, and is not even essential for its life cycle. Okay, is not even essential for its life cycle. So the paratenic host, you need to understand that actually this paratenic host, it functions as a transport or as a carrier host. So in other words, paratenic host is also known as the transport or carrier host. Then lastly, but not the least, we have what we call amplifier host. We have what we call amplifier host. So the amplifier host is a host in which the parasite lives and tends to multiply exponentially. It amplifies, okay, the multiplication of the parasites exponentially. Hopefully we are together up to this far. Then we have what we call host parasite relationship. We have what we call host parasite relationship. So we have four of these host parasite relationship. The first one being symbiosis. Okay. So in symbiosis, you'll find that both organisms are interdependent upon each other. Okay, both organisms are interdependent upon each other. Okay, so in other words, you find that no one can live without the other. Okay, that is the symbiosis. They depend on each other. The same way you cannot live without God, you depend on God, but the good part is that God can live without you. Okay, that is symbiosis. Okay, so but hopefully you get the point that symbiosis, both organisms involved, they are interdependent on each other. Then we have what we call commensalism. We have what we call commensalism. Okay, so commensalism, you'll find that in this kind of host parasite relationship, the parasite only derives the benefit without causing any harm or injury to the host. Okay, but it benefits. So the parasite benefits, but it does not cause any harm to the host. Then we also have what we call parasitism. Parasitism. So on parasitism, um, this is where now the parasite is the one that benefits and the host is harmed. Okay, so in this kind of relationship, one of the parties involved benefits and the other is harmed, and the one who is usually harmed is the host in parasitism. Then we also have what we call mutualism. So in mutualism, um, both both organisms actually benefit. Okay, both organisms actually benefit. Let's talk about transmission of parasites. Let's talk about transmission of parasites. So the transmission of parasites depends strongly on these three factors: the source or the reservoir of the infection, the mode of transmission, as well as the susceptibility of the host. Okay, for a parasite to be successively transmitted. Okay, so what are the sources of infection? What are the sources of infection? So these are the sources of infection. You have man, you have animals, vectors, which are usually arthropods, contaminated soil and water, raw or uncooked meat. Okay, so when we talk about man as a source of infection, this is when now infection is transmitted from one infected man to another. So when infection is transmitted in this manner, that from one infected man to another, it is what we call anthroponosis. Anthroponosis. Then when it comes to animals, um, this is when now infection is from animal to human. So when the infection is from animal to human, we call that zoonosis. Zoonosis. Okay. For example, the the cystic, for example, the cystic echinococcosis, cystic echinococcosis, which is from dogs. Okay, and then you have toxoplasmosis, which is from cats. Then another source has to do with vectors. So when it comes to vectors, these vectors are usually arthropods, okay? And you must understand that a vector can either be biological or mechanical. Then we also have contaminated soil and water. contaminated soil and water. So when it comes to contaminated soil and water, um, when the soil is polluted with human excreta, which actually contains eggs of the parasites, it can act as a source of infection. For example, hookworm. Okay, so hookworm, as well as Ascaris species, etc. Also, water contaminated with human excreta containing cysts of E. histolytica or Giardia lamblia. Okay, Giardia lamblia. They can all act as sources of infection. Are we together? Okay, then we also have, last but not the least, raw or uncooked food. Raw or uncooked food. For example, raw beef, which might contain larvae of a certain parasite, and also pork, which might also contain a certain parasite, are the best examples of raw and uncooked meats, which are usually prevalent as sources of infection. Then let's talk about the modes of transmission. Let's talk about the modes of transmission. So, talking about the modes of transmission, we have a lot of them. We have what we call oral or fecal oral route. So, this is the most common. This is the most common mode of transmission. Okay, so in this first, um, i- on this one, what we're trying to say is that infection is transmitted orally by ingestion of food. It can be water, which is contaminated with feces that might be containing the infective stages of the parasites. For example, we have cysts of E. histolytica and also ova of Ascaris lumbricoids. Okay. Then we also have penetration of the skin and mucous membranes. Penetration of the skin and mucous membranes. Okay. So this happens through unbroken skin. Okay. Through unbroken skin. For example, the the filariform larva. Okay. Filariform larva of strongyloids, Stocoralis, okay, and hookworm or Plasmodium species, including the Leishmania species, among others. Then the other one is, so we've talked about this. The other one, the other mode of transmission is sexual contact. Okay, sexual contact. The best example on sexual contact has to do with Trichomonas vaginalis. Okay, Trichomonas vaginalis is the most common parasite mode of transmission in this case. Okay, so the Trichomonas vaginalis is the most common parasite transmitted via sexual contact. But you also need to take note that there are certain parasites that are prevalent when it comes to or among homosexuals. Okay, very, very important to take note of that. Then Another mode of transmission is bite of vectors. Bite of vectors, for instance, malaria. You have the female Anopheles mosquito. You also have African sleeping sickness, which is as a result of fly. Okay. Then we also have vector transmission. We also have vector transmission. So vector transmission has to do with mother to the fetus. Okay. Mother to the fetus. The best example is Toxoplasma gondii. Okay. Toxoplasma gondii. That's the best example. Also, blood transfusion. Okay. Also, we have blood transfusion. For instance, the Plasmodium species can be transmitted through blood transfusion. Then, the last but not the least, we have auto-infection. Okay, auto-infection. So, on auto-infection, you'll find that a few intestinal parasites may be transmitted to the same person by contaminated hand, which can be considered as the external auto-infection, or by reverse peristalsis, which is considered as the internal auto-infection. Okay, so this is commonly seen in Taenia solium. Taenia solium. Then we can talk about host susceptibility before we look at three or four questions, MCQs. Then we call it a day. Host susceptibility factors. So when we're talking about these are the factors which actually increase the chances of the the transmission of the parasites. Okay, they increase the chances of transmission of the parasites. So you have a thing to do with age. You have a level of immunity. Okay, you have level of immunity. Um, where the immunity might be natural or acquired. The We have intensity and frequency of infections, or it can be the presence of a coexisting disease or condition. Somebody might be pregnant, or somebody might have HIV. So those things, they actually increase the chances of transmission of the parasites, because you'll find that the immunity or the immune system would have been tampered with. Then when it comes to the parasite factors, we can talk about the parasite load. Okay, so the parasite load, which has just to do with the number of parasites. Okay, the sites of the body that have been occupied, the sites of the body that have been occupied, um, metabolic processes, a metabolic process of the parasite, that is particularly the nature of any waste products or toxins that are either produced by the parasite during its growth or during its reproduction. Okay, so these are the factors that exacerbate the chances of parasite transmission. So this very, very important slide, okay, the life cycle of parasites. So when it comes to the life cycle of parasites, we have two of them. The first one is this one that is on this very slide, that is considered as direct or simple life cycle. Direct or simple life cycle. So in direct or simple life cycle, you'll find that a parasite only requires one host to complete its development. Only requires one host to complete its development. For example, the E. histolytica. Okay. Also the Trichomonas vaginalis, the G. lamblia, among others. Okay. There are a lot. There are a lot. When you look at this very slide, there are a lot right here. Okay. You have the Ascaris lumbricoids. Okay, there are a lot. Okay, Then the second one is indirect or complex life cycle. So on the indirect or complex life cycle, this is where now you'll find that this is when a parasite requires hosts, two hosts, one definitive host and the second intermediate host for uh, in order to complete its development. Okay, for example, the Tenia solium, where you find that the definitive host will be a human being and the intermediate host will end up being a pig. Okay, so direct, only one host is required for the completion of development. Then for indirect or complex, we have two hosts, one definitive and one intermediate. Then you also have this, though they'll be talked about as you proceed in this very course, when it comes to the types of specimen in parasitological diagnosis. So you have stool can be used, blood can be used, urine, sputum, skin, cerebrospinal fluid. Are we together? Are we together up to this far?
Yes, sir.
So we are done with the introductory part to medical parasitology. We are done with the introduction. So relax for 30 seconds, breathe in, breathe out. Let's attempt the following MCQ questions. So the first question reads, okay, so I want you to see that what we just covered, chances of you being assessed are there. Okay, so question one says, what type of life cycle does Ascaris lumbricoids have? A. Direct. B. Indirect. C. Complex. D. Intermediate. What is our answer? You can just type in the comment section. We'll be able to see your answer regarding question one. What type of life cycle does Ascaris lumbricoids have? A. Direct. B. Indirect. C. Complex. D. Intermediate. So, okay, someone is saying direct. Caro is saying direct. Others, what are we saying? Okay, yeah, so definitely our answer is direct. Let me just take you to this slide. Have you seen this slide? So the Ascaris lumbricoids is here. Okay. So in other words, you need to know the things that are found here. Okay. Great stuff, right? Yeah. So here we've gone with A. Then question two says, what is the primary mode of transmission for hookworm species? What is the primary mode of transmission for hookworm species? A. Mosquito bite. B. Tsetse fly or tsetse bite rather. D. Midge's bite. D. Skin penetration by larvae. What are we going with on question 2? Okay, so we are going with D because we even talked about this, right? We even talked about this. Okay, so skin penetration by larvae. We go to question number 3. Which of the following parasites is transmitted by a dog? There is supposed to be A somewhere. So which of the following parasite is transmitted by a dog? A. Tenia signata. Then you also have this one here on B. And then when you go to C is saying Echinococcus granulosus. Then D, you have this frightening term. What are we going with on D? I mean on question 3. Which parasite is transmitted by a dog? Okay, Tracy is saying C. Others, what are we saying? Okay, someone is saying I will go with A. A is Tania signata. Okay. Others, what are we going with? Or you are going with whatever anyone goes with? Others, what are we going with? Okay, I'm seeing Namakao also going for A. Should I give people an opportunity to unmute themselves and speak? So that people can pronounce these frightening terms. Some of these terms you just swatter them the way they appear and just know how to write them. Others, so uh, we've only seen three submissions. Okay, so remember when we were talking about the host? Okay, we're talking about question 3. Remember, we were talking about the host. When we were talking about the host, we mentioned that we have definitive host, we had carrier host, we had what's this? We also had amplifier host, then we also had reservoir host, right? So on reservoir host, we mentioned something saying that um, the example that I gave us was that when it comes to reservoir host, we have an organism that gets to harbor a parasite and as well as serve as a source of infection for other species. Then we said that, for example, when you look at a dog is a reservoir host for cystic echinococcosis. which is a parasitic infection that comes as a result of the larva stage of Echinococcus granulosa, which in turn primarily affects the liver and the lungs of the human being. Are we are we together? So, what do we think is the final resolution? What do we think? Or what do we think is the final resolution? I've seen Jackman has gone with C. Okay, the other one is still maintaining with C. Then for those who mentioned other answers, what is your conclusion? You want to explain or we move? Okay, so the answer is C. Okay, so on this question, our answer is C. Then question number 4. Blood-sucking vector may transmit blood-sucking vector may transmit A. Ascaris lumbricoids. B. You have ancylostoma duodenale. Ancylostoma duodenale. Then you also have C. You have strongyloids stecoralis. Then D. You have plasmodium. Which one are you going with here? Okay, Tracy is saying D. Others, what are we going with? This is actually our last question. Then we call it a day. Others, what are we going with? Blood sucking vector may transmit Ascaris lumbricoids, Ancylostoma duodenale. We have strongyloids, stecoralis. Then you also have plasmodium. What are you going with? So on this question, our answer is D. Thank you very much. This is where we end for today. I believe